first memories of getting into the audio hobby and the love of music was there's probably two of them, I think. One of them was, I had an old, I think it was Panasonic cassette boombox thing. Wasn't particularly big, just a couple of full range speakers in a front loading cassette deck. And I remember learning that if you sat that on the ground and you laid on the ground with the top of your head sort of touching the cassette door, so the speaker was either side of your ears, that thing sounded absolutely fantastic. It created this weird sensation of having the kind of the music wrap around your head. And I remember just laying there for hours listening to that for all different tracks and just experiencing music in a different way. So that was one of them. And the other one I remember was I had a set of Sony earphones, so not in ears, but little earbud things, wired ones of course, because this was back in the 80s. And I remember sitting in the back of the car on road trips or whatever with the family and putting those in my ears. And I think at that stage, by then I was probably, I might have been still listening to a Walkman, or maybe I'd moved on to a Discman by then, but just enjoying the music as I watched the world go by, and the way the music kind of made a soundtrack to what was going past the window outside, and just hearing things differently because it was through a decent set of earphones, which, you know, in the scheme of things were not that expensive, but again, it was that new experience of different sounds that I hadn't heard that way before. I been noticing lately that I think the journey to becoming an audiophile, if you want to call it that, an audio lover, a music lover, whatever word you want to put to it, the journey to becoming that, or the journey of maybe discovering the products that open that up for you, I think is a really important one. I think sometimes you can love music and you can want to get in touch with the music, and if you're in a position where you're fortunate enough to be able to jump to the top of the tree, I think that sometimes does the person a disservice. I think the journey of going through cheap gear on the way to getting to the high-end gear actually helps you appreciate that high-end gear more and make you realize what you've already gained and how little more there is to gain. And as an example, I mean, my first audiophile earphones and systems were things like, I can't remember the name of them now. Was it No, it wasn't VSonic. That's a newer brand. There was an old set. I'll put it on the screen if I can think of it. But there was an old set of IEMs, one of my first ever kind of audiophile IEMs, and then playing around with the different. There was, I think, the Rockbox software that you could load onto the original iPods, and how you could get better sound by doing that, because you could start to play back lossless audio files like FLAC, ALAC as well. That was my first entry, so they were still very, very basic products that didn't cost a lot of money. It was the GR07 was the IEM, I just remembered, and maybe it was a VSonic, I'll look it up as I said, but I'm pretty sure it was called the GR07, and that sparked a new interest for me. It was the highest quality level I'd ever heard in music and audio gear, and it led me to the next step and the next step and the next step. You know, one of my very first big expenses would have been into the Sennheiser HD650s. I built myself a bottle head crack. I bought a set of custom Unique Melody Miracle IEMs back then. And so my point in sharing all of this is that I started off really, really small, and each step of that journey, I learned what you got from going to the next step. I learnt the incremental improvements that you gained, and you know, each time you get a little bit more. If you choose well, you get a little bit more performance, soundstage, resolution, frequency balance, whatever it might be, and you also get less and less of it as you go up, generally, if you're only taking small steps. But what I've noticed is that I've had some channel patrons, I've chatted to people in the comment sections here on YouTube, and what often I hear is that there are people that come into this hobby later in life, and when I say later in life, you know, maybe they're in their 30s, maybe they're in their 50s, their 70s, whatever, but the point is they've come into the hobby at a time that they have money, and by having money, they're able to jump straight to the top of the tree, and they're buying a TT2, or they're buying a they're buying a Hollow May, they're buying a Burson Voyager headphone amp or an Enlium or whatever it might be. They're jumping in at the very top of the tree, and then they're restless and they're looking for what the next thing is they should be buying, and they're wondering how to get more out of their system. And I think a lot of it is that they don't realize they're already getting the most out of their system. They're already getting a system that is really, truly excellent. But because they haven't been through that journey, they don't know that. And I think it's like anything, when you have a chance to start, if you think about learning a skill, when we learn a skill, we start at the very bottom. We start with the absolute most rudimentary ability to do something, whether it's picking up a tennis racket and hitting a tennis ball for the first time. It's clumsy. It doesn't feel right. It's new and it's different. And then you learn and you get better, and the nuance starts to come out in whatever your skill is, whether it's playing a sport, whether it's an art or a craft. You gradually get better. You find new ways to do things. And that's where the growth and the enjoyment actually comes from, and the ability to get to the end of that. Not that there's ever an end, but the ability to get to the mastery level of whatever that thing is. That's actually the fun. That's actually the piece that helps you properly appreciate where you've come from and where you are now. And I think sometimes people get robbed of that in this hobby because it's not a skill. You don't need to earn your way there from a skill and a practice point of view. You can jump straight there if you have the money. And so I guess what I'd say is, for all of those out there, all of you out there that are new to the hobby and you're wondering where to start, I think start little. There's a few reasons for that too. It's not just about saying you shouldn't jump to the top end because you're going to miss the journey. There's also the fact that when you jump to the top end, you're spending a lot of money. And if you're spending a lot of money without yet developing a sense of what your tastes are, you're possibly going to waste a lot of money, because you're going to buy gear without knowing if it actually suits you. You're going to buy it because somebody else, a reviewer, somebody outspoken on a forum, the mass market when something's new and it's hyped, any of those factors are going to lead you to buy something that somebody else tells you is the best, but it might not be the best for you, and you won't know that yet because you haven't taken the time to develop your understanding of what is best for you. And so I think that's actually where starting small and starting low is really actually a benefit to the individual, because it helps you understand what's going to be right for you when you start spending more money. So I guess the takeaway from this for me, and the reason I wanted to share this, was to say, embrace the journey, embrace the steps along the way and the learning that comes from each of those small incremental steps that you can't really get when you jump to the high end. Because once you get to a certain level, everything's the same in terms of technical performance, but different. You're not going to have the understanding of how much better soundstage can get, or how much better the resolution and detail retrieval can get. What you're going to be hearing is the difference between the character of this amp and this amp, or this DAC and this DAC. You're going to be left searching for things that you actually can't find because they happened earlier in the journey, but you happen to skip that part of the journey. So that's a few thoughts. If you've been on the journey yourself, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. If you've skipped the journey yourself and you're finding yourself frustrated or not, maybe you've landed on the perfect system, and that's fantastic too. Let us know in the comments below how your journey's gone and what's worked for you, hasn't worked for you, etc. But I just thought I'd share this while I was in the car and driving along, and it was bubbling around in my brain. So for now, as always, thank you to channel members, channel patrons, those that send super thanks on YouTube. And I'll find a cool video to link up here. I don't know which one it's going to be yet, but whatever I've chosen there, it's going to be a good one. And for now though, happy listening, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.